We're going to get going. We have a really interesting program today. We're going to be hearing from Audrey Wieber, who's here. He'll talk in a little while about Alaska and some efforts that we are going to be supporting in Alaska. Jim is going to give you the background on why we are interested in that. We just did a new member orientation and we had a few brand new people. One person came because we were handing out 31st Street business cards at the protest. We just had them in our back pocket. We were like, oh gosh, we have these cards. We got to hand them out. And we just went up, handed them around. I got rid of mine really fast. People were coming up to me and saying, oh, can I have one? So one of those people came. So that's just terrific. We're going to keep doing that. So I'm not going to say a lot today. I think all of us are probably drowning in the news and watching as much as you want to watch and then turning it off and trying not to think about it. It's, I'm sure everybody has their own feelings about it, but it's disconcerting at the very least. It's frightening. It's worrisome. And as people were saying in our orientation, when things like this happen and we know who's leading our country, leading quote unquote, it does make one feel very helpless. And this is a place that we can feel that there is something to be done and we can do it. So I'm not gonna go on today. I just have one quote that I'm gonna close with, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Jim. But this quote sort of says it all. And it's from Mark Twain, who is wonderful. Courage is resistance to fear. It is mastery of fear. It is not the absence of fear. And that's where we are. Here we are. We're all courageous on this Zoom. Jim?
Oh, great. Okay. So most of you know me pretty well, I think. I'm the political analyst. I did just want to say one thing about what I'll call the shock. We get a series of shocks, and this is a big one we got. And when this kind of thing happens, I just kind of look around and I sort of keep moving along, keep doing the work, keep pushing things, sometimes maybe even work a little harder. So I guess I have the makeup that I can kind of do that. I don't know if everybody else can, but that works for me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen rather, and talk about the work I think that we can do and needs to be done that's going to keep our democracy. People see that and hear me? Okay, good. So if you'll indulge me, I like to show our principles when we start. So we don't just kind of do things haphazardly, I guess. And just to highlight a couple of them, we call this zigging when other people are zagging and playing to win. And I'm highlighting those because it's not really a secret maybe that we're going to be talking about the U.S. Senate today, among other things, but a lot of focus on that. And that's not something that other folks are actually focusing on that much. But I think we really need to do it. And it's part of playing to win. And I do think that social media is the way that we can do that. So, but before we get to that, we can celebrate that, yes, with your help and your leadership, we have reached our goal of $200,000 for our slate of 8 candidates. And again, we were strategic about that. We did it early because early money is much more helpful for these people. And now other people are weighing in. Now, we're not giving up on Virginia. So we actually raised $215,000, and we think it's a message that can not this fundraising, but the fact that when we're hopefully going to win, it's going to win big, hopefully, including the statewide races. We have a great set of candidates that will send a great message. Now, we're not giving up on Virginia, though other groups are weighing in well at this point. The States Project, NOPE, for example, also. But there are 5 of these candidates that now that the primary has come and gone, we still think could use some additional support. And it's going to be kind of not a full court press or anything, but it'll be on our website, for example, if people want to donate to those 5 candidates. And so we're shifting gears away from that, not entirely, but again, mostly focusing on social media. But we've been talking about social media for some time, and we've already had a big fundraiser of social media. So it's territory that I hope people are becoming familiar with, even though I know it's foreign territory to a lot of people, social media and how to use it. Okay, but I'm going to talk about data first before talking about social media. And these come from Simon Rosenberg, who's very good at putting the data, and this is recent data, it really shows that Trump, in terms of his popularity, he's on the ropes. Now, there's a lot of numbers here, so let me help a little bit. Basically, in this particular poll, and it's fairly consistent with the other polls, he's underwater by 13 points, which is historically low. But also notice, I hope you can see this also. There, I don't know if you can see the little red arrow or not. You can, okay, good. So among young people, among Hispanic people, actually among Black people, among independents, among low income people, he's way underwater. Okay, I want to ask though, what's missing from this list in terms of groups? I'm looking at my sister, see if she might know, but I'm not gonna put her on the spot. She can't, she's muted, fortunately. It's actually rural urban. Rural urban is actually, we got to start winning in rural areas, and we don't get data on rural urban because it's very hard to do that in polls. But just to kind of come back to that point. All right, and this is some of the, again, very recent data from YouGov, Economist, on the various issues. Trump has lost on the tariff. He's lost on immigration. Look what happened after the Los Angeles event. He's underwater on what was their signal issue in 2024, immigration. He's underwater. I don't know how the Iran conflict is going to play out, but I do know that by 2-to-1 margin, Americans didn't want us to do what he did. Now they may rally behind him, but I don't think they're going to. Now, of course, he's not running for election. What we need to think about actually is the Congress, and majority of Americans do not like what I'm afraid I'm calling the big ugly bill. They don't like that. And when they end up voting for it one way or the other, and especially if it comes to pass various parts of it, that's not going to help people in Congress, the Republicans in Congress either. I hope they're paying attention. But here's again, getting back to rural America, we don't have really good polling data that I know of. But the fact is that these Republican parties' policies are really hurting rural America a lot. Medicaid cuts, tariffs, SNAP cuts, and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we have to make inroads in rural America. But part of the trick is going to be, the part of the effort needs to be to have a communication effort that reaches these people and that they're not just watching Fox News and listening to right-wing radio. So that's part of the rationale. But here is actually the pinnacle of what I want to talk about. It's the most optimistic thing, something called the generic ballot. Generic because they ask people about who they're going to vote for or they like to vote for Congress. And at this point, you can see that in this particular poll, and I saw another one very similar, Democrats are up by 8% in terms of what the voters, the population, say they're likely to vote for. That is actually pretty stunning. We have last seen this in 2018. We did not see it since 2018 when we won a lot of races in the US House. So as things stand now, and this actually goes back a little ways, June 12th, we're looking pretty good, especially for the House. And so that's one reason why we're tending to look also now at the Senate. Now, the Senate, of course, is very challenging. This is the Senate map, and we have the problem that we have to defend Georgia and Michigan and Minnesota. We only have 47 seats to begin with. So again, playing to win, if you will. How could we, how could we win the Senate, or at least improve our position in the Senate? However much we improve it, it'll make it better. Although winning it is very important. So we have tier one races, North Carolina and Maine, where I think we actually have excellent chances to win. Then that gets us to 49. And then, of course, that brings this to this point that some of you may have seen the news courier, excuse me, the article that I had recently. Anyway, we've got these three seats, especially Alaska and Iowa, and I also want to include Nebraska, though I think it'll be harder. That's the way that we can actually win. Although there are a few other conceivable ones, including Texas. If Paxton, their sort of ultra MAGA attorney general, gets the nomination, we could actually win in Texas. So there's a way to do this, but it requires building infrastructure to make it happen. Here's our triangle for the sweet spot. Oh, the other thing is just on those three states, just to make the point that there are 4 key U.S. House races and 2 governor's races and a bunch of legislature races and whatever else. And the great value of supporting social media, which is where I'm trying to think we should be heading, is you have influencers that are providing pro-democratic and issue-based things. It'll help all the candidates up and down the ballot. Okay, so some of you may remember that in the past, I've talked about a 3-legged stool for winning elections. Well, now I've decided that there's 4 legs, 4-legged stool. Again, I hope you can see all that. But it's the candidates, the Democratic Party, civil society, including grassroots. Those are all the ones that we've had before. But social media and other communication, in my view, merits its own stool. But I think to win these races, though, I think we're probably going to focus on the social media, at least for a while. But all these other things are going to need support as well. All right, so now shifting a little bit again to the social media side. We showed this last month that most people don't get their news from legacy media anymore. They prefer to get it from digital devices. What that happens, though, in many cases with the Substacks and the podcasts, is that you get all these platforms very decentralized, but it's also a longer term relationship. It's a connected, interactive relationship. These influencers build authenticity and trust. And so it's a different approach and it takes time. But one of the reasons why I'm advocating to do this now is it takes time to get things mobilized. Now, okay, so enter Courier Newsroom. I say enter, though we've supported them in the past. They actually have a very large social media presence in a variety of ways. Their newsletters and TikTok and so forth. But they're now promoting and developing something they're calling the Local News Creator Core. And the emphasis is on local. And they want to have, within a state, presumably a network of these people. And what they can do, their comparative advantage, in addition to sort of seeing that this is an issue and sort of getting a jump start on it, they have local news presences in these states. I'll show you, there's a map that will come to that. Not every state, but a number of them. And they want to create, of course, partner with other people and other organizations. They actually have a pilot going on in Virginia right now because to make this happen, you've got to find these influencers, you've got to sort of reach out to them, you've got to cultivate them, you've got to nurture them, and also provide them with content. So they have a small content pilot, I think 7 at the moment, maybe going to go to 10. And they're learning the process of doing this. One other major, huge potential advantage is that it looks like most of this is eligible for 501(c)(3) funding. It's you know, for tax deductible funding. And that's because, you know, it's advocacy for issues, it's advocacy for policies. It isn't, you know, focusing on candidates, campaigns per se. So that's a big benefit as well. And here's their map. Now, I want to say, and we're not ready to ask you to contribute money. Let the record show that we had a monthly meeting and we did not actually ask you to contribute money for something. But we, you know, at some point, of course, we will. And that's because we're trying to do some good due diligence still. But it's already become clear two things that just to understand in terms of caveats. One is that, you know, this is a bit untried. In other words, we know that this is important in terms of people voting. We know that the right wing has actually a different kind of infrastructure to provide misinformation and so forth. But we don't actually have, you know, good evidence as yet, even though it seems intuitively obvious that you can find these people, you can enroll them, you can motivate them, mobilize them, and then they'll actually influence voters and it will influence their vote. You know, it all makes logical sense, but we don't have that as yet. Um, and there will be mistakes made, and there'll be lessons learned. But I think we're going to have to try to undertake it. I should also say that we have been pushing, including with that article from the Grassroots Connector, with our various partners that this is a good thing kind of thing, not necessarily the Courier, this particular thing, but in general, blue media. And I think that's going to help contribute to the process. But it's not going to be cheap. It's going to take some resources to make this happen. And just to give you a sense, these are two of the Virginia influencers that are on TikTok. And you know, they're already doing episodes on TikTok. You can see the one on the left has to do with Trump's big bad ugly bill, although you can't see all the letters. So just to give you a sense of who these kind of folks are, they're young people, they're diverse people, but that's who that's who we need to reach. So now I'm shifting gears again. We're going to have Audrey talk about Alaska in general. Now, Audrey happens to be the State Communication Hub Director. I think I have that correct in terms of his title. He has broad knowledge, though, of Alaska. He's really here to talk to us about Alaska politics in general. But I did want to make for people to understand that there is yet another part of our system that, you know, we've talked about donor tables in the past. There is a communication hub, and it's coordinated by something called Progress Now that kind of sets up these organizations. All these turquoise colored states have people who are there to do progressive communication coordination on behalf of democracy. And Audrey happens to be one. And I just wanted people to understand exactly what his position was, although he's going to talk much more broadly about things. And with that, we'll turn it over to Audrey. So over to you, Audrey.
Thank you so much. And let me share my screen real quick. Thank you all for having me. And yeah, as Jim said at the very beginning, you know, I didn't know that this presentation when we planned it was going to come a day after we entered a new war in the Middle East. And sometimes the gravity of everything that's going on right now can make you know, talking about individual state strategies seem trivial, but I find I'm very lucky to be doing this work and that it is kind of the most constructive way for me to kind of deal with everything that's going on is to just kind of really bury in the work and really specifically in Alaska, where I think we have a lot of opportunity. And you know, we've been talking about the 2026 election cycle here in Alaska really since 2020, which was the last time Senator Dan Sullivan lost a race. And looking at 2026, where the kind of the stars align a little bit, where we have an open governor's race, we have a U.S. House seat and a U.S. Senate seat up, as well as protecting majorities in both chambers of the legislature. I'll get into kind of some of the nuance of that here in a second. But we've been looking at this not only because we knew that Dan Sullivan is perpetually weak and a seat that we realistically can flip, but also we have all these demographic markers that are showing that we are becoming more and more progressive, and 2026 is really this like central turning point. So as you can see on here, we are a racially diverse state. We're the third youngest state in the country based on median age. We are 41% BIPOC. In 2022, we had this big win that really was kind of an indicator of Alaska progressing, and it really came honestly quicker than we expected. We had kind of a snap election with a representative dying in office. And ultimately, Mary Peltola was the first Alaska Native member in Congress. In addition, we have these majority coalitions in our legislature, which are made up of Democrats, independents, and moderate Republicans, which I understand might sound weird to some people. But we're talking about a state where a majority of people are registered as independent, and only 13% of people are registered as Democrats. And so the idea of how do we build power in this situation really is working in this nonpartisan, bipartisan, tripartisan, whatever you want to call it, way. And the result of that is you generally have, in the House, for example, you have a Republican, a moderate Republican that is, the Speaker of the House, and then Democrats hold gavels across all committees. Just in this past cycle, we were able to pass an increase to education funding that we've been fighting for years. And then when the governor vetoed that, we got a veto override for the first time in 23 years. So Republicans came together with Democrats and independents and overrode a Republican governor's veto. It's also, our legislature, similar to the state, is ethnically diverse. It's also now, for the first time in 2024, became a majority woman legislature. Like I said, 58% of people are not registered with a political party. So that's really kind of where we have found our opportunity. It fits in very much with the kind of Alaska culture, this idea of being independent. It really, really resonates. And we've seen a lot of success with that at the legislative level. At the federal level, we haven't seen the same success. We did have in 2020 independents running for House and Senate, but they were also both endorsed by the Democratic Party. Our governor basically pulled a little trick and had D's next to their names on the ballots. And so you kind of miss the authenticity of that independent registration. But we're seeing more and more independents run, and this is, I think, a really critical graph to look at. So if you look at this, the blue dots here are Democratic candidates, and independent candidates, and the red dots are Republicans. And then you can see their success trending over time, and you really see as we get past the kind of 24 cycle, we're on trajectory to move into blue winning. And so now I'm going to kind of focus a little bit more on what we're doing right now leading up to the 2026 election. And really the center of this battle is around Medicaid cuts. A third of Alaskans are on Medicaid, and part of that is inflated because the tribal healthcare system runs through Medicaid. IHS healthcare is funded through Medicaid, and so these cuts could be really devastating So in addition to having a high enrollment on Medicaid, we have really limited access to healthcare. It's basically centered in the cities, and we have the most expensive healthcare in the country. So we're looking at, around 50,000 people losing their insurance. There's an estimation of 18 deaths per year. I think that is very limited, especially, there's some nuances that we won't get into, but like transportation for patients is funded by Medicaid, and that would likely go away. This will be extremely devastating here. Dan Sullivan has been mixed about his statements on Medicaid, but right now he's trying to confuse the public by introducing amendments to the bill that are basically just talking points that don't do anything. It's creating a fund that's unfunded for the most vulnerable populations, which aren't defined. This is all lip service, and it's because he knows that this is going to be a huge issue for him. And it's our job to really pin this vote on Dan Sullivan. I'm not going to play this ad. I know we have limited time, but this was a $500,000 ad by the C3 arm of the Senate Leadership Fund. So this is calling Dan Sullivan a Medicaid champion. He is not. He has said Medicaid is a bad thing, but they know that this is important to his constituents. The response to that was Majority Forward, which is an arm of Senate Majority PAC, bought a $500,000 ad by talking about how Sullivan's going to take away his health care. Since I made this slide like a week or two ago, Families Over Billionaires did another six-figure ad by, there's a third group that has one going now too, and there's also now an ad talking about how Nick Begich, our Republican freshman in Congress, is a Medicaid champion. So all the national groups are really seeing this as the critical issue. This specific ad was something we're working very closely with Senate Majority PAC on our accountability campaign focusing on Dan Sullivan. And this is something that was really ultimately in part designed by our research. They were looking at tariffs, and we had been doing research through all of 2024 and continuing into 2025, and it really showed that Medicaid was the more salient issue. So through that partnership, they were able to change course a little bit, and we're able to have this impact, which is really helpful for us right now as we're kind of figuring out what is our message after the bill when all these national groups go away, relatively. And so it's very helpful for them to provide us some kind of air cover as we're doing continued research. We have a poll going to the field in a couple of weeks to figure out how do we talk about this for the rest of the year.
Alaska.
Sorry. And so I'm just going to step back a little bit and look at kind of this idea of accountability, which is really where we focus as the 907 initiative. And I should have maybe said some of this stuff at the very beginning. We started in 2022 and really kind of became this rover in the political landscape of Alaska, where we don't have a core issue that we focus on. We don't have a membership like labor does that we're working to protect. We're able to really bounce around and fill gaps. And we quickly realized that the gap was this extended narrative campaign. We had a bunch of stuff around election cycles, but we didn't have anything leading up, a year and a half before an election cycle to really create the environment for a more competitive election. So the first one we did was focused on Anchorage's mayor, former mayor, who was elected, a political newcomer, elected during some COVID angst. Very Trumpy, worked to dismantle municipal government, hired a bunch of people that had never done those jobs before. And so we ran an 18-month campaign using digital, mail, radio, like programmatic video and linear television, all sustained around this idea that this leader was incompetent. It was ultimately extremely effective. We dominated the narrative around the Anchorage mayor. to the point where if you went on the local newspaper and just searched keyword searched the word incompetent, hundreds of stories of Dave Bronson would come up. So now we're looking at that model around Dan Sullivan. And like I said, we're focusing on Medicaid. This is a little animated digital ad here, but just showing it's a petition for people to sign up. We've had an incredible ROI on this petition, and we're building out a list of thousands of people that we're able to activate and just kind of get this narrative out there a little bit more. And we're also through there, when people are filling out these petitions, they're giving their personal stories, which we can then use later on in ad creation. We can reach back out to these people and say, hey, do you want to do a TV commercial? We've also done dozens of direct-to-camera interviews that we can use in ads over the rest of the year. And we've also started planning some events, and this is something kind of new for us. We're generally a paid communications organization. But what this has done, I think, really powerfully is for the first time since Dan Sullivan was elected in 2014, it's changing the public perception. He's generally viewed as very safe. He's a generic Republican in a conservative state. He has a military background. And he generally tries to kind of stay in the background because a lot of his positions are not popular with Alaskans. He's much more conservative than Alaskans are on average. But they don't know that because he maintains a really low profile. And so we're trying to drag him out. We're trying to get media attention. We're trying to make sure when people are driving their kids home from school, they see this big group of people and they say, what's going on? Oh, everyone's mad at Dan Sullivan. We did another event around May Day with a bunch of labor organizations. We had thousands of people show up, tons of earned media, again, just trying to change this narrative over time.
Well, May 1st.
I won't. Another project that we have is called the Alaska Delegation Watch, which is a 501c3 program where it is just kind of this aggregation of news about the delegation. So this is something where we're kind of able to create this contrast in a less directly political way. We're able to track things like when was the last time they came to town and had a town hall? What is their vote on key bills? We're adding in campaign finance information, a fact checker, public statements on critical issues. And the idea is this is not necessarily built for like the standard person. As Jim was talking about earlier, people aren't going to legacy media. They're also probably not going to websites like this, right? That takes a certain kind of person. What this is designed for is to be kind of a toolkit for media when they're looking and seeing, how did Dan Sullivan vote on this bill? How did this differ from how his colleagues voted? Who's taking money from, the industrial fishing industry? What are these issues that are really key to Alaska? It's all packaged right there. You don't have to go through federal websites to figure out what happened. So it's just another look at this. We've already gotten this. This is a fairly new program, and within the first couple of weeks, we had multiple references in newspapers. And really, what we were able to do, we were holding an empty chair town hall. No one knew when the last time Dan Sullivan did a town hall in Alaska. So we researched that. We put that up on the delegation watch. We cited that in a press release, and then they're citing this and kind of doing that branding for us. So that's my presentation. I hope that's helpful. I think we've got some time for some questions. I know that was really quick and there's a ton of details in there, but I hope that's a nice quick overview for you all.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. Really appreciate getting that information. I am Aaron Hamburger. I do membership for 31st Street Swing Left, and I also field questions for our Q&A sessions, which we are about to embark upon. So the first, and by the way, if you have other questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to leave them in the chat. First question that came up is Republicans figured out how to use social media several election cycles ago. Why are Democrats just now figuring this out?
And I'm not, is that a question for me or was that?
Well, it could be for you, or it could be for Jim, or for anybody who would like to answer that.
Oh, I guess it can be for me. I saw that. Let me say, I think we're catching up. This is not the first thing we learned about legislatures being important and so forth. I can't say why folks didn't really focus on that in the past. I will actually say, though, for local influencers, if we do this, we're actually kind of leapfrogging what the Republicans do. They have a lot of big stuff, and they have, national influencers. As far as I know, they don't have local. They are not cultivated local influencers. So that's the best I can say.
Okay, great. So this is actually an Aubrey question right here. Are you focusing on the population centers or also doing outreach in rural areas?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so part of the reason why we had done an accountability campaign against a mayor, which I know might sound weird, is Anchorage is 40% of Alaska's population and 2/3 of the state's media market. So it is really the only urban center we have. There are some others like Juneau and Fairbanks, but you're really talking about 30,000 population cities. And so the answer is both. Anchorage is the easiest place to communicate in. When you get into rural Alaska, you have a ton of issues. One, it's hard to get there actually, like physically. You have to fly there and it's expensive. You can't really poll in just rural Alaska. You can kind of overweight rural areas. You can do little clusters to kind of figure out what the issues are, but it's pretty hard to poll there. There is limited opportunity to advertise. There's limited internet connectivity. And so one of the things that we're working on right now in 25 is partnering with an organization called the Rural and Indigenous Organizing Program that hires canvassers in rural areas where they live. So if we want to canvass Dillingham, we hire a team lead in Dillingham, and then they hire their own team and they're talking to people and doing that kind of direct person to person thing, but also kind of figuring more stuff out. What are the issues there? What type of media are people consuming? How do we serve ads to them next year? And so right now, while there isn't snow on the ground, we're really focusing on getting around the state and kind of arming ourselves with the information we need to be successful next year.
Great. What are some of the issues where Sullivan is voting differently from the way Alaskans favor? I know you were talking about Medicaid earlier, but
Yeah, so I mean, Medicaid will ultimately be one of them. Commercial fish trawlers, which is like boats that scrape the bottom of the ocean. It's really decimated our fisheries here, and those tend to be run out of Portland and Seattle. Sullivan takes a lot of money from them. One of the bigger, like specific bill things that we've seen, I mean, one, his stance on abortion, he's staunchly pro-life in a pro-choice state. So that's a huge one that's kind of evergreen. He's also had some votes against capping prescription drug prices for seniors. And yeah, basically any healthcare things. He's been in favor of the tariffs. He came out yesterday with a full-throated endorsement of the bombings in Iran. So there are a number of things.
okay. Can you talk about how you are influencing social media, what kinds of content providers you're working with?
Yeah, so we have our own social media accounts. We also have the Delegation Watch, and we run, separate ads for that. And then we also do have a news site that is kind of similar to the model that Courier has with their local newsrooms. It's called the Alaska Current. I'll put this in here. And this is something that we're able to, we have kind of a number of content creators that work on that as independent contractors. And so they kind of bring in their own audience and are able to use their own platforms, their own social followings to get articles out there. We kind of it's a range of political coverage and cultural and lifestyle coverage as a way to get more people in the door. But basically, we have a number of channels that we're reaching in addition to just paid media, which is kind of primarily where we focus.
Great. So we are actually not strangers to Alaska. In 2020, our group substantially supported Dan Sullivan's challenger, Al Gross, who ended up losing by about 12%. Do you think Sullivan is substantially more vulnerable now than he was then? And why?
Yeah, great question. The answer is yes, and it's like five, for like five reasons or fivefold, right? One, Dan Sullivan has never run in a midterm with a Republican in the presidency. So we see that every cycle, the incumbents party takes a beating in the midterms. That's never been an environment for Dan Sullivan. We also now have ranked choice voting, which is an environment that Dan Sullivan has never been in. That was the result. That resulted in Mary Peltola winning her race, and really, and we can get into kind of some of this if y'all want. But that's also why Lisa Murkowski was reelected. She would have lost to a much more conservative challenger if it weren't under an RCV environment. Additionally, so with Al Gross, that was kind of, that race picked up fairly late. And it really wasn't until Ruth Bader Ginsburg died that it became this big, expensive, high profile race. So there was limited time to define Dan Sullivan. And just to be super frank, Al Gross had his own issues and really did not resonate with Alaskans. I think he did really well in fundraising, but he was not. Yeah, he did not resonate with Alaskans, and he also had a number of kind of personal baggage, I'll say. And so there were a number of reasons why that wasn't he wasn't the best challenger. But also now we have this long-term campaign working to define him so that when we do have a challenger come in, we're able to be the bully and beat up on Dan Sullivan. They can focus on their own platform. But it really takes, over a year to kind of cement these narratives and really get into kind of the public conversation.
Thanks for that answer. Is Mary Peltola involved in this coalition building that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think Mary will end up running in one of the races in 26. It's kind of it looks like it's going back and forth between running for governor or challenging Sullivan for U.S. Senate.
Interesting. Another question that came up is about AI as it relates to workforce replacement or safety. Is that an issue that Alaskans are concerned with, and has there been any effort to develop a message around it?
We haven't seen that here, and we don't have like a lot of tech in Alaska. It is probably more like physical jobs. We have, I believe, the highest per capita of enrollment in organized labor in the country. So I think, yeah, primarily our main jobs, oil and gas, fishing, I wouldn't see that as an AI replacement issue.
Hmm. Okay, and then the last question that actually we another one just came in. How do issues surrounding fossil fuel and climate change resonate with Alaskan voters? Obviously, fossil fuels must be important.
Yeah, that's it's a really tricky one, and that's why, you'll have people like Mary Peltola, who has, when she was in Congress, she did support several extraction projects in Alaska, which did turn off kind of her core base, or her most progressive base. But it's a complicated issue here. And in rural Alaska, you have a lot of indigenous communities where their economies are directly tied to oil and gas. We don't have taxes. We don't have any state taxes. And so our state government is largely funded by oil and gas taxes. And so it's just a really complicated thing, and essentially, to be politically effective, you're going to have to make some compromises on resource development in Alaska.
We're also wondering too, a lot of us are in DC. We're very aware of what's going on with federal workers losing their jobs and the various budget cuts. We were wondering, are many Alaskan federal workers at risk of losing their jobs? And also, with cuts to NPR, is that affecting local Alaskan stations that reach people?
Yeah, 100%. Huge issue. We have a really high like per capita federal workforce, and we're seeing issues in national parks with the defunding and cuts at NOAA that has a huge impact. Their forecasts have a huge impact on our fisheries, and the ability for the federal government to figure out when people can and can't fish. And then the NPR cuts, yeah, I mean, we haven't seen anything yet as far as like stations cutting. But basically the only media in rural Alaska is public radio. There's no commercial radio in rural Alaska, and so that's a really critical network to get information out.
Hmm. Oh, it's really important to know. Well, Aubrey, we really thank you for coming and speaking to us and updating us on the situation there. We can all give Aubrey a hand, virtual hand, as it were.
Yeah, thank you all so much. It was a wonderful opportunity. I'm always so excited when people are interested in what we're doing up here. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.